So I think we will start now, punctually as we have done in all the previous sessions. I'd like to extend a huge warm welcome to everyone who is joined us from, as we can see in the chat, from all over the world. My name is Dr. Miriam Snellgrove, and I am a research fellow on the Bridge and Mind Sport for All project. This session is going to be exploring gender and sexism within Bridge and will hopefully be an incredibly exciting and dynamic and engaging session. Can I encourage everyone to please put as many questions and comments and thoughts in the chat? No such thing as a bad question or comment. That will help us to definitely get things going and talking. And before I hand over to Sam to give a more lengthy introduction, she's going to ask you to fill out a little poll. So if you wouldn't mind doing that now, that would be fantastic. Are you for or against the existence of women's bridge as a separate category is the question. For, we should keep it. Against, we should abolish it, or I'm not sure. So if you would just take a few moments to do that.
It might be in your chat. If you can't, you either see it on your screen, in your chat, and some of you won't have it, I'm afraid. Some of you won't have it in your chat. But if you can't find it, try your chat.
Where is chat?
You'll have a menu bar across the middle of your screen, Laura, and there should be a little bubble in it. But you may not have it if you're in the browser.
Got it. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we've had 34 votes. We've got 37% for keeping it, 20% for getting rid of it, and lots of you sitting on the fence, 41% sitting in the middle. So bear this in mind, remember what you voted, and we'll revisit that at the end and see whether any of you, yes, we are going to do that at the end of the session if that was the question. We will be voting again at the end of the session to see whether we have made you change your mind or not. In relation to our discussion, so
whether you remain to sitting on the fence, but we're hoping that won't happen. So I would now like to hand over to Professor Samantha Punch, who is the principal investigator and brainchild behind BAMSA, who is going to provide a brief introduction into the BAMSA's research on gender and the kind of framing and understanding that we have of how we're looking at gender. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to say that Dr. Ashley Rogers can't be with us today, so the panel will actually end up kicking off with Sophie. But because Ashley wrote the paper that she was going to talk about, that there's a pre-recording that she spoke to, she wrote that paper with both Miriam and I. So Miriam and I are going to do a bit of a double act and replace some of what Ashley might have done at that point. So, but if you can bear with us, this is hot off the press from today. So we'll see how we get on. So I just want to do a bit of an academic overview at the start about how gender, sexism and power is conceptualized in academia. So bear with me for this sort of theorizing behind this topic at the start. So as social researchers, we understand gender, sexism and power as socially situated, institutionally organized and personally experienced. Drawing on feminist conceptualizations, then, we contend that gender is an embodied experience. So it reveals how hidden power relations can construct common sense understandings. So gender inequality then can be perceived in two ways. On the one hand, it can be perceived as a personal problem that women can successfully or unsuccessfully deal with by themselves. But the problem of viewing everyday sexism as an individual problem means that we overlook the institutionalized ways that discrimination occurs. So everyday acts of discrimination, like everyday sexism, then become normalized and explained away as a personal issue for each woman to solve, rather than as a structural, more collective problem that requires a more public collective solution. So it reflects the way that society is organised and the discourses and language that's used. And for those of you that were here yesterday, you'll see that how we understand gender is actually similar to a sociological understanding of cheating, whether you look at it as a personal trouble or a public issue. So our research then on gender and bridge has found that views do vary. Some don't see sexism at all in the bridge world, but that is a minority. It is a minority, and some women have that view. Slightly more men have that view, but both men and women, it's a minority. Some see sexism in bridge as an individual problem that women should just deal with by themselves, or some see it as just the opinion of a few difficult women. And I wonder whether I might be in that category. Others argue that sexism is a reflection of wider patriarchal norms. However, what's clear is that everyday sexism does exist and can take a variety of forms, and that can vary from belittling women's experiences to more tangible acts of discrimination. So quite small things to more serious things, but even the constant drip of small things, whilst each one by themselves may seem trivial, they can add up to be quite worrying. So such experiences then can be both individual and collective. They are personally experienced and institutionally reproduced. However, one of the issues is that the individualized narrative of gender discrimination, that sexism is something that women can deal with by themselves, ends up masking the complexity of gender inequalities in society. So arguing whether or not sexism exists in bridge can also mean that very little changes. Bridge is part of the world where there are many inequalities, so it's not surprising that sexist language and discriminatory practices exist and are contested. However, a key part of BAMS's remit is to make bridge accessible and inclusive, a mind sport for future generations to play. Therefore, challenging the ways in which inequalities are performed and reproduced within the bridge world is part of ensuring the future survival and enjoyment of the game for all players. So 2 of BAMS's research projects have explored gender, sexism and inequality within the bridge community. One was part of Bridging Minds, so it was a subsection of the interviews with the 52 elite players, and the other was an email questionnaire that followed up from that initial project to explore a wider range of players' views of gender in the bridge world. So as a result of those 2 projects, we have 4 papers that have currently been published, or one's a working paper, but it's freely available on our website. And I'm just going to very briefly just point to each of these. All of these are on our website. They're also on the conference webpage, so I won't spend long on them. The first then is a working paper called Bridging Sexism, and this details the ways that sexism is defined and understood in the bridge community by players themselves. It provides many examples of sexism, both at and away from the bridge table, and these examples are given by both men and women players. So if you're not convinced that sexism is an issue in the bridge world, I do recommend reading the many direct quotations from both men and women of a range of ages and levels of play who feel very strongly that it is an issue and that something should be done about it. But yes, of course, there are a minority who don't think it's an issue. They see it more as a trivial personal trouble that's not part of a wider collective problem, but they are in the minority. So the other pre-recording that we have on the website is a 15-minute presentation in relation to bridging brains, and this was from 40 interviews with elite players, where all the women interviewed, so 20 out of 20 of the elite women said that sexism in bridge does exist, and 75% of the men, so 15 out of 20 of the men said it exists. So this particular paper explores the notion of neurosexism and challenges the claims that women's brains are less suited to activities such as bridge compared with men. And neurosexism is defined here by Rippon as the practice of claiming that there's fixed differences between male and female brains which can explain women's inferiority or unsuitability for certain roles. And as Fine says, neurosexist research perpetuates gender inequalities. So I'd just like to point out here that BAMS's Bridging Gender project is one of 8 current research projects that we're doing, and this session on gender is one of 10 sessions at the conference. So I do strongly disagree with the critique that we've had that BAMSA is over-focusing on gender. It is one of many studies, but in our view it is an important, albeit contentious topic for research to address. So this paper, it's our most recent published paper, talks about the challenges that we've faced as a result of doing this research and some of the negative reactions we've had from within the bridge community that have made it challenging. So for example, I've been called a troublemaker quite a few times, not that bothers me by itself, but people do think that I'm bringing attention to something that people hadn't previously noticed until we started researching it. But I think that's an issue to be debated, and hopefully we'll see what the panel's reactions to some of this are today. And then the paper that Ashley was going to speak to today, and she has a pre-recording of this, is based on the research evidence we have from across both of the two research projects that I've just described, the interview data and the elite and the email data with players of all ages and levels. So our starting point today is that gender inequalities and sexism exist in bridge, as in other areas of social life. We have less than 2 hours today, so we want to avoid spending all that time debating its existence rather than exploring potential solutions. So a question we did pose and that's discussed in that paper is, how should we address gender inequalities in the bridge world? And we are coming to that in the second panel today. But interestingly, the most common reply in our email research was that the best way to address sexism and gender inequality is to abolish the women's game. And so that now will lead us into our first panel. But first of all, Dr. Miriam Snellgrove, who's going to be chairing the rest of this session, may want to add a few more words to this, and then we will be going into the panel.
Thank you, Sam. I have very little to add to that masterly description of our gender research thus far, only to say that indeed when we were writing the paper, the three of us, Ashley, Sam and I, that we hadn't initially intended to focus on the women's game, but what happened increasingly when we were going through the data was that this came out as a constant theme, that the women's game became this key issue, this key problem, this key area where sexism was being highlighted, and as a key locus of kind of tension as to what were the solutions that the bridge world could do to tackle some of the ingrained issues around sexism. And that, I think, speaks to, as Sam has touched on, the fact that the game, and the women's game in particular, and bridge, is part of a wider world where there are existing and well-documented gender inequalities. And so I think, again, as two sociologists, it's important for us that this gender discussion is not seen as somehow picking on bridge, but it's demonstrating the ways in which bridge itself is part of those wider problems, challenges and issues. And this panel will hopefully debate some of the ways in which that can be tackled, addressed and understood. So I think that's really kind of all I would like to add to that. So without further ado, I'm going to now introduce our first panel. We have two panels in going to discuss this, and the first panel is going to debate women's bridge, the segregation pros and cons, and around the women's bridge as a separate category. And for that debate we have Sophie Sjördal, Mary Sharp, Mary Kelly and Jan Kamras. Sophie Sjördal is an under 26, excuse me, bridge player and bridge teacher from Norway. Mary Sharp is a bridge teacher from England. Mary Kelly Rogers is a bridge player from Ireland and the European Bridge League's Women's Subcommittee, on the Women's Subcommittee, I should say. And then we have Jan Kamras, is our sole male on the panel, and he's the president of the European Bridge League. So I would like to start asking the panel to give us a 5-minute response to the first question that they've been asked to think about, which is, what is your interest in the question of women's bridge, and what is your position on women's bridge? So can I invite Sophie to respond first, please?
Yeah, my interest in women's bridge is mostly focused on the junior aspect of it, but most of my arguments, or most of the arguments, are the same for both young and older players. I played on the women under 26 team for 6 years, but 2 years ago I changed teams and are now part of the open under 26 team, so for both girls and boys. I started advocating for the existence of the girls category at the same time as I switched teams. There were several reasons why I started at that time, but the main reason being that I heard that there were discussions of cutting down the category. However, it was also the fact that I was no longer a part of the team, so I wouldn't really lose anything if they shut down the category. and that made it easier for others to see my arguments as good arguments instead of just something that I was complaining about because it would be worse for me if they shut it down. Alongside my commitment to the Women Under 26 team, I am also part of the Challenger group for the Norwegian women's team. I think the important question is how much does the Under 26 women's team and women's bridge in general help recruiting compared to how much damage there is by having a separate category for women but not for men. A lot of players are focused on the perception of women's bridge and that the category is the reason why men think that they are better at bridge than women. I don't think it's that simple. Ending separation of men and women won't change everyone's opinion of women, but it might take away women's safe space and their opportunities. I think most people here agree that we want more women to play bridge, also at a higher level. And if we want that, we need to work hard to include them. And that is because I think a big part of the problem is that women start playing, but they quit or they don't really play as much. Each year, the Norwegian Bridge Federation arranges a bridge camp for juniors. And my first year at the camp in 2011, there were 2 rooms for the boys and 1 room for the girls to sleep in. But still, there were not enough room for the boys, whilst the girls had plenty of room. I think we were somewhere between 20 and 30 people and only 4 girls. The later years, there have been a bit under 100 juniors at the camps, with at least 40% girls. However, the national teams still have much more boys. If we count all the players who played for a Norwegian junior team in the European Championship in 2019, there were 23 players, where only 7 of them were girls. And that is including the 5 players in the girls team. That means that there were 30% girls and 70% boys. So even with a separate team for the girls, there was still a big majority of boys playing. This was numbers from the Norwegian teams, but they are quite similar to the teams from the other federations, who also have a team in the under 26 category. I agree with the fact that without a women or women under 26 category, there would probably be more women on the open teams, but I don't think there would be many. However, I wish that was not true. I wish that there would be almost the same amount of women on open teams without and with the women category. The women teams should be for those who are not good enough for the open teams so that they can get practice and resources to improve and maybe play in an open team later. If women are good enough for an open team, they should get a spot there. The only exception being if they don't want to play in the open team but rather want to play in the women's team. Unfortunately, a lot of federations are not doing this. I think too many think that since women already have a spot in the women's team that they don't need one in the open. So they can give a spot on the open team to a man, and this is wrong. We can compare this to those who are old enough to play in a senior team, but also good enough to play in an open team. I think in this scenario that nearly all federations would let the older player play in the open team. Why are we not doing the same to women? This is something that needs to be worked with, and I think every single federation, with help from the European Bridge League and the World Bridge Federation, need to find ways to make sure that they are not doing this. In many cases, it is probably easier to pick the pair without a team, but that doesn't make it fair. So if federations start to pick the best players for the best teams, I think having the women under 26 and women category is a good idea.
Thank you so much, Sophie, and beautifully spoken and succinct and to time as well. Fabulous, thank you. Can I now invite Mary Sharp to respond to the question about what your interest is in women's bridge and your position on women's bridge? Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for welcoming me. Well, I'm a professional teacher and lecturer, and one of the topics that I teach and lecture on is bridge. And I'm also a trustee for the EBED, the English Bridge Charity, who I'm not speaking on behalf of here today. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. But before I was any of those things, I was a feminist, and I still am. And it's always seemed self-evident to me that women are unable to compete equally with men in physical sport. That's just a kind of self-evident thing. But it's always seemed completely self-evident to me that women can compete with men absolutely equally in fields of intellectual endeavour, whether it be rocket science or playing bridge. I really don't see any difference. And if women are underrepresented or underachieving in those fields, there seem to me three reasons why that might be the case. Firstly, they are actively discriminated against by selectors and so forth that don't want women involved. I don't know if that happens very much. Much more likely, probably, there is societal pressure that women conform to gender roles that are disadvantage them in particular intellectual fields. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Sam Punch is wrong too. Women have weak, feeble brains that actually aren't as good as men's, and therefore we really shouldn't be playing bridge or being prime minister or being senior judges or senior policemen or anything else at all, because somehow our brains are weaker. I'm afraid I don't go with that line of argument. In bridge, as in every other sphere of human endeavour, there is some discrimination. So my position is to immediately, from this moment, stop segregation in women's bridge, and to start this next second positive discrimination to include women in bridge and to enhance their ability and overcome some of the obstacles that lie in front of women but lie less in front of men. Now, I think the reason for women's underachievement, just a little bit more on my reasons for that. Some of these things seem so obvious. Women have much more challenges to their work-life balance. I learnt bridge when I was young. I barely played it when my daughter was young, and I've come back to it with a vengeance. But that's a pattern that is far more familiar with women's lives and is going to disadvantage them from succeeding at the top level. That is almost inevitable. Bridge takes a long time to play, like golf. Maybe simply shorter bridge games, or might be a way forward. I think society's pressure on women inevitably leads, and this is a generalisation I'm unhappy to make, but it is broadly true, that women are less confident than they ought to be and men are more confident than they ought to be, and that is an advantage in the bridge world, maybe not in life, but it is in the bridge world. And I think that segregation exacerbates that problem, because men don't learn to be a little bit more modest and women therefore don't learn to be a little bit more confident, which is generally what needs to happen. The same thing happens with bad behaviour. I think that women are much less tolerant of bad behaviour at bridge table. They're much more put off by it. Maybe more the society pressures has led them to be more empathetic. I don't believe that is innate at all. But again, segregation exacerbates those tendencies rather than kind of making it better. And I think that lack of toleration of bad behaviour is a really good thing. So I think the game needs women to kind of normalise the behaviour at the bridge table, which can be very off-putting. Again, I think through necessity, women have become better at multitasking. I don't believe it's innate, and I do think that picture is genuinely changing. But it isn't great for bridge if I'm actually also doing my shopping list while I'm dummy and I'm not really concentrating, because women, that work on intense focused concentration is something that women maybe need more coaching to catch up on. I'm sure that's true of myself. There's certainly an old boys culture in bridge, which is an embarrassment, frankly. Women selected ahead of men and so forth. I think there's a disadvantage to women who learn with their husbands, because sometimes those relationships are, I've taught several married couples and I've seen the wives defer to their husbands rather than perform an equal relationship. I think there's an issue there. And I've heard it said that, again, the existence of the women's teams means that women are not going to be selected for the open teams, and therefore it's a major disadvantage. So just to sum up, I'm absolutely against any kind of discrimination. Two final points. Just consider how this discussion looks to the real world outside, people who don't play bridge. Bridge already looks old-fashioned and fusty and musty. And here we're having a debate, which I honestly haven't had this debate since the 1980s. Gender discussions in this world are now about cisgender v transgender. We're not talking about men v women. To me, the debate in gender has moved on miles and miles. And I didn't know that we even had to have this conversation. I think the bridge world is lagging behind. But finally, if we have a situation of discrimination, which we do, I am under no illusion that this advantages men as well. Maybe not in terms of how many gold cups they win, but it doesn't make the world a better place or their lives a happier place if they are also pushed into a position that is not necessarily comfortable to them. I think we've seen dramatic changes in gender in our society, and it's let that just naturally break through into our society. So 1 minute I'm being told, abolish it now. Thank you.
Beautifully done. Thank you very much, Mary Sharp. I would now like to invite Mary Rogers to give their opinion on the question in Women's Bridge and position on Women's Bridge, please. Mary, are you there? She was here earlier.
Do you mean Mary Sharp?
No, I mean Mary Rogers.
There's no Mary Rogers.
She was here earlier.
We could maybe move on to the next one and then come back to her.
Okay,
Mary
well,
Kelly Rogers it is.
Yes, Mary Kelly Rogers. She was here earlier on in the session, and I said hi to her. But while we're waiting for her, maybe Fred needs to look for her again.
I've got her.
You've got her?
I've just made her a presenter, so give her a moment to.
Thank you. That's probably what it was.
Yeah.
Hi, Mary. Sorry about that. Can we invite you to respond from your own position? You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Mary, you have to
Okay, I'm
Wonderful.
here. Okay, thank you, Miriam. I could hear you, but you couldn't hear me. Anyway, I'm Mary Kelly Rogers, as you say, and in Bridge and Women's Bridge, I'm a quarterly newsletter. And thirdly, I am a facilitator for the organisation and scheduling of women's teams that are played twice monthly, and that's for 24 countries. So that's my involvement in Women's Bridge. And just to take us back to 3 years ago in Belfast at the EBL seminar for officers for 30 countries in Europe took part. We discussed Women's Bridge and should it be a separate category? And in doing so, we explored, should we scrap it? Should we abolish it? Should we segregate it into just men and women? Or should we keep the status quo, which is opens and women choose? And this is how it is in chess, and this is how it is in many sports. And the consensus was, let's keep it. But let's build Women's Bridge. Let's work with it, let's develop it and look at what the issues are. So for the purposes of this BAMSA conference, I went to the 8 World Bridge Federations. I emailed representatives, and they came back to me saying that women in general were intimidated. They also said that if you removed the women's category, what you were really doing is you were removing women from bridge, and many women would leave the international scene. And then there was a cry, keep the Venice Cup. That was continually said, keep the Venice Cup. So then I went to captains and players in the EBL, some of whom I look after for the teams. And they reiterated this, the exact same answers. And so why do women not play the Opens? And some suggested that there are just simply innate differences between men and women, both in their nature and in their upbringing. And they suggested that men and boys usually, and I think Sophie, you might have noticed this, that men and boys can be very confident. They take the game on at the scruff of the neck. They really love taking risks, and if they get a bad result, well, so be it. They're going to move on to the next and learn from it. where on the other hand, men or women and girls can be self-critical and they looking for approval, and they're lacking in confidence. So what we can do in Women's Bridge, we can undo this, but we have to work on it. We have to put structures in place, and we've got to build it. And we're already in the EBL doing this with some success, I have to say. So 16 teams from the EBL came back, those that responded. There were 16 teams that responded. I think I wrote to about 20 teams, and they all said, keep Women's Bridge and let's work on it. And then I spoke to some women who have managed to move into the open, who are very proud to be there, who are very comfortable there, and they love the cutting edge of Bridge. And I spoke to them and they said, well, we love where we're at and this is where we want to be. But we feel that there should be Women's Bridge for as long as women want it. And some even went on to say, you know something, I prefer Women's Bridge, and that's okay too. Now I'm going to give you an example. In the German, okay, 1 minute, I'm being told, I'll be very quick. In the German Federation some years ago, they decided to scrap their national pairs championship, and there was a complete outcry. And the women started voting, they started networking, they started looking at what could be done, and they brought back the pairs championship, and they had greater numbers than ever before. So what is to be learned from this? Well, what we learn is it's not about abolishing, it's about building. It's about communication, it's about structure, it's about input. We can work on this Women's Bridge, and we can bring more and more women to that open category by building that confidence. And you know something, I think my minute is nearly up, so I probably should finish. You know, I think as more and more women move in the open category and Women's Bridge is developed to that extent, I think men might well look at Women's Bridge and say, listen, we need to up our game as well. Okay, thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much. Given the internet problems and everything, that was brilliant. Thank you. Can I now invite Jan Kamras to give his opinion on the interesting question in Women's Bridge and his position on Women's Bridge. And then after that final discussion, after Jan's presentation, we will then move to questions from chat. Thank you. Over to you, Jan.
Thank you very much. My interest, of course, is in all bridge. As the president of the EBL, I treat men and women and anything in between equally. I think that the big question here is are there genetic / character differences ingrained between the genders or not? If there are, then I think that absolutely from a theoretical standpoint justifies having a separate women's category. On the other hand, equally, if there are no such differences, I cannot say that it is rational to defend having a separate category. I agree with a lot of the things that Mary Sharp said, but that being said, if women, as Mary Kelly says, if women want to keep, and as Sophie says, if women and girls want to keep a separate category, that's fine with me as well, and that's fine with all my colleagues as well. And I think there is no intention of anybody and I'm now speaking only on the international level, of course, of abolishing the women's category if women want to keep it. I do, however, believe that for the quality of Women's Bridge, it would be better to abolish it. I will come in there is a question 2 afterwards, where we have 2 minutes, where I will come to my thoughts on what can be done to bridge the gap. So I'm not going to go into that now. What is very important, I think, also is to recognize that there are enormous societal differences between geographical areas. I assume that Sam's research and interviews have been mainly with British respondents. I mean, certain of the sexism answers would never occur anywhere, I think, at least not in the Nordic countries. And I should say that in the Nordic countries, in Sweden, I think more than 50% of the federation's members are women. So I think to use as a justification for having a separate women's category to recruit more women to bridge, that for us is not a logical argument. We need to recruit more men. Then, so the question is, if women want to keep a separate category, that is fine. But I think then women may have to accept that a lot of men will still consider that, well, women seem to think themselves that they are not quite good enough, so why should we contradict them? Again, large difference. I think south of the Alps, maybe generally speaking, there is a different societal situation as well. And the Nordic countries have pretty much equality between the sexes, genders, sorry. Finally here, I should note that women, I saw it for 1 minute, have a large benefit actually over men in international and national bridge, because women can participate and qualify for all 4 categories that we have championships for: open, women, seniors, and mixed, whereas men can only participate in 3 of them. So I think that's a huge advantage for women, which I don't begrudge women having. That's okay with me, but I think one has to realize that it comes with rights, comes with some obligations as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. I mean, there's been lots of flurry in the chat over your conversation that Nordic countries are these wonderfully egalitarian places with no sexism. So I mean, it sounds like heaven. I'm not sure that necessarily always goes out so much, but I think we could always ask Sophie to chip in, but we won't put her on the spot right now. What I'm going to do is go to some of the questions from chat, of which there are very, very many, unsurprisingly. So give me a second if you wouldn't mind. There is a question from Alex Gibson, where Alex has said, is there real difference between having different events for women, senior and mixed events? Does anybody from the panel want to chip in there? Is there any real difference between having different events for women, senior and mixed events? And whilst having a separate women's game might provide fuel for sexist views, would abolishing it really change those views? So I think that touches on some of the things that you've been saying, Jan. If we abolish it, and this taps into something that Mary's been saying, would abolishing the game really change those views? I
think it would, maybe over time and gradually. I don't think it would go from day one, but it would be a gradual process, like all other processes in this area in society, not only in bridge.
Okay, can I invite maybe Sophie or Mary to respond to this? Because you've spoken, both of you, in favour of keeping it. Would you mind elaborating why you don't want it to be abolished?
I don't really think that's going to be a solution that easily. I think we need to do more than just abolish a category. And if abolishing the category means that people don't really, or women don't really have opportunities to get as good as men, then suddenly we have less women, and then I think we have an even bigger problem, because we're going to lose more of the women, and then suddenly we end up again being only male, and we need to fix that. So we need more women before we can abolish the category, I think.
I think it's the other way around. I think until we abolish it, we won't get more women, because the discrimination, the segregation is causing the problem in the first place. It's causing the view of women's bridge as some kind of lesser thing. I think the comparisons with senior bridge is quite interesting, because it would seem to me very apparent that if you're a senior like me, you're going to be less good at bridge as your brain gradually slows down, your memory decreases. That's inevitable. So I don't mind playing as a senior. That's great. That gives me, a field where maybe I can do better in. But women's bridge is not like that. Women are not a category where their ability is defined by the category where seniors are. So it's a fundamental difference to me.
Mary Rogers, do you have anything to add? You're muted again.
Miriam, just want to say that at the USBF trials for the Worlds, there are 20 teams entered in the Opens, and among them there are 7 women. And then when you go over to the women's trials, now the numbers could change, but there are 5 teams. So, you know, the women aren't going into the Open. Of all the negativity about the women aren't playing in America, they're not playing in the women's trials either. So I think we've got to get rid of a lot of the things that have been said and just work on women's bridge and develop the game and encourage women to move into the Opens.
So I have a question also from Tim Rees that feeds in beautifully from that, which says, why do you think that so fewer women succeed to get into open teams? If it is it selector bias, or is it that women are not on the best trialist teams? Any of the panel, the 3 of the 4 panel, like to jump in as to why they think so few women get into open teams? Sophie?
I think that it's common for women to not have as good a team as many of the males. So it's more difficult for them to get picked. And also in a lot of countries, there's not really trials. You just get picked by the captain or by the federation. And then the problem is that they might not pick the women because they don't think they're as good. But it's also the fact that I think I already mentioned that women get picked to the women's teams, and then because they already have a team, they don't really want to pick them for the open teams because they think that they can include more players if they just pick the males for the open teams.
Thank you very much.
Can I?
Yes, Jan, would you like
because I actually have been a selector of the Swedish open team for a 10-year period, and we didn't have trials. I picked whichever team I thought was going to have the best chances to do well, and in the group among I had to select from, women were, you know, anybody could apply, and I believe that most people trusted that I would pick the strongest team irrespective of gender. But one should also consider that when the federations know that there is the Venice Cup, etc., you want to have as strong as possible a women's team. So there is an incentive for the NBO to pick the strongest women, not for the open team, but for the to create a strong women's team. So, you know, that might actually affect the calculation as well.
I think this is really interesting, and it taps into some of the questions that have been coming up in chat about the fact, and I think it's a controversial opinion, and I think we should get, you know, we haven't got much time before we move on to the next one, which is the fact that you alluded to this, Jan, and some people in chat have been saying the same, that, oh, women have a women's event, men don't have a separate men's category. And somehow that is seemed to mean that women actually have a better deal because they have their own women's event, and men are somehow being hard done by because they do not have their own event, so they can only compete in the open, whereas women have a women's event and can compete in the open. Do any of the panel have thoughts on maybe starting a separate men's category, or thoughts on that?
I can't think of anything worse. I mean, that's making the problem 1,000 times worse. Why would you want a separate men's category? I mean, you know, the point is we're not separate. We may be different, but we have intellectual equal abilities, and I want to compete with men and women on equal terms. End of.
Mary Rogers?
I think that, you know, when it comes to women, they have work, they have family, and they have bridge. And usually they can be successful at 2 of these. They can be successful at work and family, or work and bridge, or family and bridge. And so they actually need that extra to help them on the way. I really really do for this reason. Because I think somebody else said women often have to give up bridge while they're bringing up family. So they need that extra bit to, they need women's bridge in the meantime.
Thank you. And that taps into some of the things that I think if Ashley had been here, she would have argued that obviously bridge is part of a world that is very gendered, and we still exist in a world where we have unequal divisions between gender and labour and care responsibilities. And so that therefore then you can see the need for a women's category because of those other caring and domestic and familial responsibilities. We're now going to move into our second question. And our second question is, in your view, what needs to happen in the bridge world in order for the women's game not to be needed? So this is about solutions. We're focusing on solutions here. We've identified that there are issues and our panel have different approaches to what that should be. I'm going to take a stab that I kind of know what Mary Sharp's going to argue, but you each have a couple of 2 minutes each to kind of give your kind of solution focused approach to what you should do. And so I'm going to reverse this, if you don't mind. I'm going to start with Jan, and then we will go to Mary Kelly, then Mary Sharp, and we'll finally end with Sophie. Okay, so Jan, if you can kick off with solutions, please.
I think something very important is being done in Sweden, and Sophie probably knows this. At the junior stage, there is no segregation between girls and boys. They all get the same coaching. They are coached together. P.O. Sunderland has been a fantastic coach, and there are also, you can see there are a lot of girls on the open youth teams in the different categories. And actually, I would say that in Sweden, the weakest team has become the only women, the under 26 women team, because all the good girls are playing on the different open categories, of which there are many more. So I think the key, and you see the Swedish women's team won the Venice Cup last time, and most of them come from this. Well, one comes from the Norwegian program, but most of them come from this junior program where they have spent their whole youth playing and training with and against the boys. So clearly, if you have to start it there. I still, like Sophie says, if the girls want to have at least one general U26 category, girls only, fine, if that is perceived as a positive. But the training together, separating them in coaching and training from such early age makes absolutely no sense to me. And any differences between the genders, I believe, maybe occur later on for more socio-economic reasons, which Mary Kelly alluded to.
Thank you, Jan. Over to you, Mary Kelly.
You probably predict what I'm going to say as well, because I think it's a very theoretical question, a utopian question. I suppose if there were equal men and women playing in the opens, you could say, well, we don't need women's bridge anymore. But it's a cycle. It's evolving. People are coming in and out of the categories, and we will need women's bridge. So, you know, as I said, you're asking the question of the wrong person, I think.
No, thank you. That's absolutely fine to point that out. I think that is the idea, that if we lived in this wonderfully utopian world, then obviously we'd be starting at a wonderful point where everybody was equal, but obviously that's not the world we're in. So yes, thank you. Mary Sharp, can I call on you now?
I think there needs to be a real will to solve this problem, and I haven't seen any real will. I mean, Jan, I agree with much of what you said, but I read a kind of, well, it's up to you attitude there from kind of what you were saying, and I'd like you to take leadership and say, actually, no, I'm standing up for this, and I'd like everybody who represents bridge organisations to do that. I would like to see serious focusing on mentoring women in order to enable them to compete equally. More mixed events, obviously, but my big thing, two big things: positive discrimination. There's a quota for every team. End of. We have it in politics. It's absolutely ordinary. You know, every team has got to have. I don't know what the percentage would be, and we would obviously hope that would be a short-term thing that would drop off as the teams evened up. And it would be a sacrifice for a generation of women. I do recognise that, but in the long-term goal, it's the good thing. Secondly, a boycott. I call for it now. Every woman and man boycott any gendered event. End of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Sophie, would you like to give your 2 pennies worth on what the solutions would be?
I think it's quite simple what we need to do. We need more women. When we are closer to an even split, we can abolish it. I think we need at least 40% women. And then when we do have that, I'll be happy to say that we don't need a women's category. However, we are quite far away from 40% now. I don't have exact numbers of how many women play in the open events or like the adults. You don't have to be an adult, but I did ask 3 of the Norwegian players who played on the national team in 2018 in the European Championship, and they all assumed that it was around or a bit under 5% women, and they were absolutely sure it was not more than 10%, which obviously is really low. So we need a higher amount of women in the open teams before we can cut the category. But with that said, I don't think anyone should consider themselves as a female bridge player. I never identify as a female bridge player. I am a bridge player, but I have played for a women's team, but I'm not a female bridge player. And I think that's really important. That's something our captain has said many times, that we need to consider ourselves bridge players. So, yeah.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I'm now going to picking up on Mary Sharp pushing Jan a little. There's also a question here from Alex Gibson who says, Jan, how can the EBL have a coherent view on women's bridge and respond to sexism in bridge when its main committee lacks any real diversity? It appears to be dominated by white middle-aged men asked by a white middle-aged man. So I guess the question is here, and pushing what Mary Sharp said, does the EBL have the right glasses, as it were, lens to bring about the change?
That's an interesting one. First of all, the EBL executive consists of candidates who have been introduced by their respective NBOs for elections. So, you know, yes, we could do what I think Mary Sharp was alluded to, do some positive discrimination and say that we will not fill up the full 12 seats on the board unless there are at least, let's say, 4 women. And if there are not 4 female candidates, if there are no female candidates, so the board will only be 8 persons or whatever we want to do. I think that it would be very difficult to get acceptance of such a proposal. And by the way, I'm not for it anyway. I am for that's the best person for a job should have it. And I would wish, and we have tried. I mean, I've talked a lot to Sophie, you know, Karianne Opsahl much better than I do, probably. And she is very strongly promoting these matters in the EBL executive. We have 2 women in total, also Sevinç Atay from Turkey. But, you know, until we have such a positive, and by the way, it takes we cannot decide this, Mary. It takes a General Assembly to change our statutes in order to enforce such a regulation for our elections. So it's really not up to us in that sense. And secondly, we have to recognize, I think, that EBL cannot be everything to everybody. We have NBOs, we have district organizations, we have clubs. I don't think we can, and you know, we have 46 different countries. Each country has its own particular social and other situation in bridge and outside of bridge. And for EBL to go in there and try to regulate on a one size fits all basis, I think it's not possible. But we can be there, of course, to assist and help when an NBO wants assistance in any of these matters. We of course should be able to give it. But short of that, I'm not sure. Anyway, I think that we treat the women's category pretty seriously. I think we have. I don't think that you can say that we are not doing that, or if you can say that, please say it.
So I'm not going to And Mary Rogers, you wanted to come in there, but there are some comments in chat, Jan, that you may want to engage with, where people are arguing or suggesting that putting the women's category at the same time as other events, kind of coinciding with other events, means that it is seen as a lower category. So there are some comments worth perhaps looking at in chat. But Mary, you wanted to say something. Your hand was up. Mary Rogers, or are you frozen?
Yes. I don't know.
No, you're back. You're good.
It's really up to the NBOs to bring women forward for election to the EBL. And last time there were 3 women and 2 got selected. So really it's not the EBL problem. It is within the NBOs to actually we can't blame Jan for that. That's really what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Do Mary Sharp or Sophie have any comments on that, or not really?
I think I'm talking about a will to change, Jan. I mean, I can see what you're saying. I can see you've got a complicated administrative nightmare to deal with. I can see, you know, the complications here, but it's the will to say, you know, the way this is working at the moment isn't right. We have whatever percentages men, I've no idea. Is there a way around that? Can we alter the way things are constituted? Can we, you know, if it was a worse problem, if it was a racial problem, there would be more will to solve it, I suspect. I just think let's really call this out. If you're a completely male-dominated organisation, there has to be a way to get women into that, to get diversity into that organisation, not just say, well, you know, these are the people they send us. I mean, I know it's difficult, but it's the will to change it that we need.
And that will, I agree with Mary, it has to exist at the grassroots level. That's where it starts.
It starts with leadership too, people who have the power and the voice and the access to publicity.
Okay, thank you. I think I will just jump in here with one question, because I think this is going to pick up what Mary Kelly and I think has been touched on here, and has been a big discussion in the debate about women's ability to develop. And Mary Kelly Rogers has argued that they need these spaces very much to be able to develop. And I have a question here from Kolu Wen, who has said, having good practice partners and opponents are important. How often do our tier 1 lady players get that opportunity, let alone tier 2 or tier 3? So I suppose it's about opportunities to access practice and opportunity. Does anybody want to come in to that? Mary Rogers.
Okay. Well, in the EBL, we're doing that. We're working on practice batches for teams. We're also looking at organising practice matches for aspiring teams. We're not getting much success of that at the moment because they're not coming forward. And Jan, you know that we've run the series of championships over this lockdown for women, and their coaches can watch and see, and it is useful.
Yes, I think you've done a fantastic job there, Mary, and I've tried to support it, which Mary Sharp, of course, doesn't know about, but I have actually. So no, great job and good, excellent training for the women's national teams.
Any other comments? Sophie, did you want to chip in there?
I think that I didn't fully hear what Mary Kelly was saying, but I think what she was talking about was the practice matches between women's teams, and I think it's important that also women get to practice with even better players, because most of the people on the women's teams aren't the best women or aren't the best players, because there are male players who are better. And I think women need to be able to play with the men as well. And I think a lot of women get that opportunity in mixed tournaments, but otherwise they don't usually get that opportunity. And it's a lot of women who's playing with women, but not really in other tournaments. So I think that's something that needs to be worked with.
Thank you. Mary Sharp, do you have any thoughts on this or not? On how getting women more access, other than obviously burning down the building?
Well, positive discrimination. I just don't think we've talked about that enough. You know, having some kind of quotas for women. Okay, so well, that's really an interesting thing to. Can you elaborate a bit more on that? So rather than having a separate women's category, you would like more quotas? Yeah. I mean, quota is an ugly word, isn't it? But I mean, it's worked in politics. And when a group has been disadvantaged for whatever complex social reasons, no blame here necessarily, you need to take positive action to remove that discrimination and to accelerate the progress. I mean, that's just obvious, isn't it? I mean, so we need to give women this space by allocating a quarter of every team or whatever it may be. I couldn't begin to say. I mean, it's a complex thing. So that women are playing on the open teams in a higher proportion than they are now. Just do it tomorrow. I don't see the problem. And you may say, well, for the next 2 or 3 years, those women may be pulling the team down or something. So be it. You know, it will catch up. The thing will get back to the normal position that it ought to be in.
I think that's a really interesting idea. I'd like to ask the panel, what are your thoughts on the idea of, rather than having a separate women's category, if there was this will for a quota? I know that, as Mary said, that can be an uncomfortable word to say. This percentage of women will be in these teams, in these games. Sophie, any thoughts?
I agree with what was said in the chat, that it will make a lot of people uncomfortable, and a lot of players already on the team will probably be strongly against it. But it's an interesting thought. It might really solve the problem, and in the beginning it might make it difficult or it might make the teams less good, but eventually I think the teams will be just as good with both male and female players.
Thank you. Mary Rogers, what are your thoughts on quotas rather than an actual separate game?
They're good enough, and they should work to be good enough. Is that what you're coming at?
No, instead of having a separate women's game, because you've argued they need it to develop, rather than doing that, Mary Sharp's arguing to put women together, and basically instead of being put off, there is simply a mandatory requirement that say 40% of the teams, or how in the game, whatever the numbers are, would be given over to women. So you'd have to have a makeup of enough women at each team and each table. It would just be a mandatory thing.
No, I wouldn't like that. I mean, I think only the best players should ever represent their country, and that women have to work to be better than, they probably have to work harder than men to be better than men, but they need to work their way up to that position.
But Mary, what about the House of Parliament in England in 1950? Is that what you'd say about that?
Can you elaborate a bit more, Mary Sharp?
Well, I mean, when, you know, a handful of women MPs, it's not because the best people had got voted in. That wasn't the situation. It was a situation that women were being discriminated against, taking their leadership role. Now that situation, 50 years later, has completely changed, and women are very well represented in politics. Not that there are no problems there, but it's an interesting comparison. So Labour had all women shortlists for seats, for example. It's not a radical idea. This is an old idea. And I don't see, I just think there's a confusion between believing that the people who are getting the positions now are the best, when the people who are really the best have been denied access. That's the problem. So you have to allow them to step up.
Thank you, Mary. Do you want to come back with that thoughts on that, Mary Rogers?
Well, not really.
That's okay. We'll move on to Jan. He's had his hand up for a while.
Don't forget that we have now elevated the mixed category into a fully fledged championship category, both in the European, meaning zonal championships, and in the World Bridge Team Championship. So we already have mixed teams. We have women teams. And so if I understand you correctly, Mary Sharp, if we would get through this change, the quota, let's call it for what it is, then you really couldn't have a women's category as well, because it's not, you know, you can't have two mixed categories, one senior and one women. So, but I think we have to realize that WBF and EBL are democratic organizations, whatever else other people might think. We are depending on the decisions of the NBOs. They are our members. So this is something I think is an interesting topic to take up on our next NBO officer seminar, and ultimately hear what our members say about this kind of proposal. I am not categorically, personally against it. I think it would be, if nothing else, a very interesting experiment. And, you know, but we cannot enforce this upon our members if they don't want it.
Yeah, and if you think it's interesting experiment, could you offer one competition where you could do that? Offer us now the opportunity to say, right, this competition next year as an experiment, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, we could do that.
That's fantastic. Sophie, did you want to come in there, or was your hand still up from last time?
I'm thinking that it might be, if it's difficult to actually have in a competition that we replace men and put in women, that it could be much easier if we force them MBOs to have practice groups, or like those who are just below the actual national team, so the full group of those who get picked for the national team, that those are forced to have also women in it, because they won't ruin or make the competition worse, someone could argue, but it would help the women to get the resources and coaches that people or men already have by being a part of the open team. Because personally, that's what's helped me the most, that I have people I can contact and I can ask questions, and they can look through my conventions and see if there's anything they can help me with. And if they also have that for women, it can get easier for those to also get a part of the team.
Thank you so much. This has been absolutely fascinating and a very lively discussion and debate, and I don't think we should park the idea of quotas just yet. I am going to now invite us all to take a 5-minute break and a breather. Please, panel one, do not go away anywhere. We're going to come back to our next panel and we're going to have more discussions. And for our attendees, please don't go away. But please have a coffee or a tea break or whatever beverage in whatever time zone you are. And we shall be back here at about 10:11 past. Thank you very much. Hello, so I think we're going to start back now. I hope you all managed to do a quick loo break, quick toilet break, sorry. I realise that's a culturally specific word for loo. Toilet break or refreshment break and whatever. Just want again to say a huge thank you to our very wonderful first panel. Didn't sufficiently give you a big round of applause for all your enthusiasm and participation. I'm now going to go on to our second panel, who are going to talk about some solutions to sexism within the game. And again, we're not debating here whether or not sexism exists, but what might be done to address it. And so the panelists will briefly outline why they're on the panel, and we'll focus on what can be done to address sexism in bridge and the challenges that are involved in that. And this panel is excuse me, sorry. The people on this panel is Laura Woodruff, who's a bridge player from Wales, Tracy Bauer, who's the former president of District 21 at the American Contract Bridge League, and Mitch Dunitz, who's in the American Contract Bridge League's Educational Foundation. So can we start with Laura, please?
Hi, I'm Laura Woodruff. I'm a bridge player from Wales originally, and I have played in the Welsh women's team and once in the Open team. But I also have a background in this kind of thing. I worked as an equality and diversity officer in local government for many years. So this is one of my areas of interest. What I'd like to start by saying is that I think the zonal organisations and the World Bridge Federation and the NBOs need to decide what they are trying to achieve. I think a lot of this has been reactive in the past, that somebody has complained, you know, women aren't getting a fair slice of the cake, and the WBF or whoever have said, oh, well, let's do something about that. Let's have a women's committee, or let's have women's events, or let's do this, that and the other. And I think before doing that, we need to decide what it is we're trying to achieve. Are we trying to achieve what you might call a level playing field in which nobody is actively discriminated against? Or are we trying to achieve equality of outcome? And if we're trying to achieve equality of outcome, we have to recognise that there are societal factors, there are factors within our own structures and processes and procedures which may tend to have a discriminatory outcome. And we need to decide whether we are prepared to put in the work and the money and the commitment to address those factors. I don't think it's good enough any longer, you know, going back to Mary's point from earlier, to say about how, you know, why are we having this discussion at all, to say, well, you know, we've done what we can, we've got this women's committee, we're not banning women from playing in open events and so on and so forth. We have to look quite seriously at what these factors are which are preventing women from participating at a higher level. And frankly, the people who are dealing with it, it's not their fault. That's not why they got into this game, are amateurs. But there are professionals whose job it is to find these things out. You know, if we're really serious about a commitment to improving the overall standard of the women's game and getting more women to participate at the top levels of the game, we need to invest in getting an organisation such as, you know, Sam's outfit in Stirling, or one of the many commercial organisations whose job it is to audit policies, procedures, structures, to do that work for us. And you know, it may turn out to be quite expensive. There may be enough goodwill among people like Sam and myself who have done this sort of thing professionally in the past to do some of that work for, you know, either nothing or for a lower fee. But I think we do have to consider, if we really want to do something about this, what are we prepared to put into it? There are some examples of how this has kind of not worked in the past. One is the EBL kindly puts out questionnaires at the end of championships to say to women, you know, what is wrong with the game from a woman's point of view? Well, frankly, you know, the women who are playing in European championships are the ones who have overcome all the obstacles lower down in the game. And you are not catching the women who don't make it that far. You're not catching the ones who have dropped out of the game altogether, which may be for personal or societal or bridge-related reasons. It's something that requires people who actually know what they're doing in terms of equality rather than in terms of bridge to do a proper audit. And it's going to be quite difficult for anybody without that professional input to do that. And in fact, it's even going to be difficult for professionals to do that at the moment, because as far as I can tell, there is almost zero monitoring. Very few bridge organisations know how many women are participating at different levels of the game. They don't look at the percentages of women players who, after participating in selection processes, are given, say, the match that doesn't matter at the end of the home internationals in the British Isles, for example. We don't know to what extent women are dropping off from one level to another, in one country or another, at global level, at European level, in the United States. We don't know the answers to those questions, even in numerical terms, never mind in qualitative terms, as to why these things are happening. And frankly, you know, if this is serious, if the WBF, and I have to say, I looked at the WBF structures and committee memberships yesterday in preparation for this, and it's utterly shameful. It is shameful. If these organisations actually want to do something about this, they have to put their money and their effort where their mouth is. I had a conversation with a very senior, what you might call apparatchik in the bridge world, at the Lisbon mixed teams, and I said one of the solutions to this would be to oblige all open teams to have 50% women. And the answer from this very senior man was, no, that's where you want to get to. And my answer was, no, that's how you get there, because until you actually force senior male players to take women's bridge seriously, it's always going to be a kind of also-ran. They will always be able to say, oh, well, you know, they couldn't win because there was a woman in the team. So to me, we really need the people who are in charge of the game at the absolute top level to say, we want women to be able to compete on equal terms, and we are going to do whatever we need to do, even if it's hiring professionals, to make that possible. It's no good just saying, oh, well, we're doing what we can.
Thank you very much. And a big round thank you very much for your 5 minutes on that. Can I now invite Tracy Bauer to spend 5 minutes on discussing how you would tackle this issue? Thank you.
Thanks,
You're muted.
Miriam.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Okay.
I took myself off. Hi, thank you guys, and thanks Samantha for the conference. So here in the ACBL and in North America, we definitely seem to have issues. I've been reaching out across North America and speaking with different women since Samantha asked me to do this. And I think we could talk for hours and hours and hours about the microaggressions that many of the women have when we go and play bridge, and we play at the tournament level. And you have to be an incredibly strong woman to get through all of that. So I think we need to be extremely mindful and have a zero tolerance policy in regards to all of that. So, you know, somebody was talking to me actually last night who is a top women's player here. And when she was on our USBF juniors team, she was paired up actually with the best boy at that time. But one of the other two boys, one of them was an incredibly weakest man on the or person on the team. And those two boys got into a fight with each other. And the coach made the woman leave the best man on her team and go be with the worst boy. So I think from the top levels up, we need to be extremely mindful of the choices that we make, to try to combat all of this. So some of the things that I've been thinking about is when I look at here in the ACBL, our view graph, the people that are commentators are almost always men. We need to start choosing women commentators. We need to show women being engaged in bridge at every level. And that is another little type of mindful thing. I think we need to have a mentoring program for women. The other thing that I've been really thinking about, I love my women's pairs and it's so much fun, but I love competing in open events. And I've thought for a while is maybe we should have just an open event and not have the separate event, but maybe recognize the top women, the top men, the top mixed pairs, the top juniors that go to our nationals and play in the open events. So we would have like our normal overalls, but then a special recognition. And that would then get the women playing in those open events. So the same thing, you don't have to necessarily have at the world level a separate event for the women's pairs. You have the open pairs, but maybe you do have a separate recognition of the top mixed pair or the top women's. It's a different type of concept. It would get us all playing together, but I think we do have to make a very concerted effort right now to do more mentoring of women and making it much more inclusive. And I think we definitely have to put policies in place. I mean, so many women, every time I tried to talk with a woman, I had to stop them about, we know there's sexism. You know, we can sit here and just talk for hours and hours and hours about that. The other thing here in the ACBL is our Hall of Fame. We should be forced to be choosing a woman every single time. I mean, this is the things that we have to do to try to even and level that playing field. So I really hope now that you guys have been working on this, that the NBOs and the WBF are aware that we have an issue, that we start to create task force and just be very mindful and put some policies in place. And I loved some of the stuff that Laura recommended, that maybe we have some outside organizations look at the policies. I mean, we still have in many of our bylaws and stuff, the word he, you know, it's just trying to level that playing field. In my own district, we were redoing our bylaws and they were switching it to he, she. And I was trying to explain to them that they, them, there is that gender neutral. This is where you're taking the gender out of things and leveling that playing field. So I also, in all of these discussions, Samantha and Miriam, I'm pretty sure in this year, we will be starting a mentoring program like Beth Palmer used to have going on in the United States. And we will probably try to restart that and really try to encourage more women to play at the top level. And this is the thing is, you know, for me, I'm still, you know, I'm just an amateur and an advancing player, and I'm not representing the United States at all. But I do come to the open events, and it's very sad to have such few women there. And I would love to see a lot more women playing. And how do we do that? How do we encourage them to do that? And, you know, my background, Title IX here in the United States, I played on an all-boys soccer team. And then I went to an engineering school where the ratio was 8 men to 1 woman. So it made me in my lifetime have to be strong in very male dominated environments and get through that. So I go and play an open, and I just want to try to encourage more women to do that. But to do that, we do have to get rid of these microaggressions. I mean, the comments that we have when we play bridge are just unacceptable. It's just not a nice environment. And that is one of the reasons that the women love going to play in the women's events, because it does eliminate that. And my generation of women coming up are also pushing back on some of our older generation of women who can be very mean at times. And, you know, women have to fight against that between each other, how do we encourage each other? So men encourage other men. We as women have to fight against that tendency that we have to compete with each other, but help each other and build each other. So I'm really hoping in the next decade, we're going to be able to do that in the United States, because the USA is way behind where Europe is, and especially the Nordic countries. And I would love to find out more, how did the Nordic countries get to a more level playing field so we can try to replicate that here in the United States. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. That was beautifully done and to time. I'd now like to finally call on Mitch Dunitz to give his opinion on how you would tackle sexism in Bridge.
Good morning for me, and good afternoon for most of you. I'm going to start off slightly off topic and then get to where you want me to get to, Miriam. I just want to say, if we take a broad look at the role of women in society and where we've come from hysteria in the late 19th century to now, the dial's been moved exponentially. And we obviously are here to debate sexism in Bridge, but I think the way to be going about this is to focus on where we've been, how we're moving. Maybe we'd like to be moving faster, and I don't disagree with that. But I think for the health of the game of Bridge and the future of the game of the Bridge, the question is, how do we properly train young women and young men and young boys and young girls to be able to feel like they can compete on an even playing field? And certainly what I've seen, both listening to this panel and in my own experiences playing Bridge, the Nordic countries seem to be way ahead of the curve in promoting and enabling young women to play Bridge. We're starting to see a real strong movement here, and probably in the rest of the world, in schooling, where sometimes you'll have women, and studies have shown that women do better in separate math and science classes because boys tend to dominate the discussions in those classes, and that and women are more successful if they're trained separately. So I'm not espousing separate and equal or any crap like that, but the point is, we as a society are trying to move forward to level the playing field that up until as recently as 100 years ago, women didn't even have the right to vote. Now, I'm a trustee of the ACBL Education Foundation, and I also mentor students, both men and women, and I also I've played with young women and men, and I just think that as people are coming up, I've got to tell you, the 16 to 25-year-olds that I mentor every week on the internet, they don't care whether they're playing with men or women. Some of the subtle or not so subtle prejudices that seniors might have towards women, et cetera, they do not have that. They just want to play Bridge, and to me, I want to encourage them to continue to play on an open playing field. And if that means that there's women's events that help them to get to the highest level, that's a good thing. If you feel that the women's events are hindering that, some of you have that view, that's fine too. I think that, to me, it's all about promoting the game and keeping the game from dying, because in our grandparents' generation, where they all survived the Depression, that was the only, Bridge and cards were the only entertainment they have. And we want to grow the game going forward. Now, moving into the mainstream of the discussion of what everyone's been talking about, you earn respect by playing well, okay? And honestly, I've played with several of the top quote unquote women players in the United States, and I don't think, they can't play Bridge, they're women. And I think the top men don't think that way. I think there is one problem that hasn't been discussed, which is, and I don't know how to solve this problem, but a lot of the sponsors want to hire all male teams. So you'll take some of the best women players in the world, and they have difficulty getting hired on professional teams. So then it doesn't be the men in those situations, and this is a little bit of a stereotype, they're looking out for their economic interest. And if the sponsor wants wants an all-male team, they're not gonna fight for that. I know that, you know, as an example of this, Tracy and I were talking last night, and she mentioned that in a recent Risinger, which is a prestigious event here, Michael Rosenberg was playing with his wife, and his wife is one of the leading American women players. And they did, I think they finished third, and then they had trouble getting hired because there was this perception that some of the sponsors didn't want to hire them. So that's another way of looking at this problem. Long term, I want to train men and women to be thinking of each other as equals. I think as a society we're moving in that direction, and that's the healthy thing. In the short run, God, I haven't seen that 1 minute sign yet. It's so great. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. No, in the short run, what do we want to do? I think there's no right answer to this. You could experiment with going back and forth on the issue of eliminating bridge. I think that's a mistake personally, because I think that I want as many people to play the game as possible, and I think that that would deter a lot of women who enjoy the game, who don't want to encounter the misogynist stuff that Tracy was talking about, and they want to enjoy the game without all the baggage. Does that mean it's tougher for women to get the highest level? Unfortunately, yes, but I don't think we can change that overnight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And if we can all thank our three panelists here, I would like to now invite the members from the panel one, if they have any comments they want to pick up on from anything that those three panelists have said. Jan? Or Mary, go for it. Mary Sharp, what would you like to say?
Oh, I was just horrified by what Mitch just said, that sponsors want all male teams. I'd just like to say, if a sponsor came along and said, you know what, I want an all white team, how would we react to that? The reaction should be the same, I think. You know, it's unacceptable. I don't know who the sponsors are. I'm not involved in the top bridge world, unfortunately, but I'm horrified to hear that.
It is horrifying.
Yeah, agreed. Very, very much agreed. Sophie, you have your hand up.
I think it was mentioned a bit, but I also think that we need to focus on the comments that are made by men that can make it more or worse for women to play in open tournaments. Like whenever you get a comment, or a woman get a comment that no one really reacts to it, it can be quite it can be small comments or it can be big comments, but no one really reacts to it. So it's all up to the woman herself to say back, and that's not always that easy. So we need other players to also talk back whenever someone makes a comment. I think that's important as well.
I think that's a really important point that you've raised there, Sophie, and that's one that's been picked up in chat quite a lot, and that is the issues around language. And the fact that the everyday language, and that taps into what Sam was saying at the beginning, those everyday forms of language that can seem trivial have a wearing effect. And I was wondering if the panel might like to comment or have a thought on bringing in more gender neutral awareness and training in relation to things like bridge.
Can I make a comment about that? I've got a kind of interest in it, in that I edit the Welsh Bridge Union newsletter, and when I'm writing articles, I try to vary the gender of the person who's declarer, or whatever. I don't say, well, if your partner does so and so, he is. And I think it's very common to see in bridge journalism, which is not about not reporting of actual tournaments, the default term he. And I think that is something that bridge journalists could pick up on and try and be a bit more punctilious about. And because people do read bridge articles and people read bridge books, and the impression that all the top players, a bit like the days when all doctors were men and all nurses were women in books, that those kind of small steps can actually make quite a big difference in the perception. That's quite a minor point, but it's one that might actually help.
No, I think it's an interesting one that it has been raised in the chat. Does anybody else on the panel have ideas about the need for more gender neutral language and awareness of the everyday forms of language and how that can be incredibly demoralizing at the table or away from it? Mary, you're nodding. Mary Sharp.
Yeah, no, I agree completely, and I think it's a problem because they can be ugly. And I've been involved in writing some bridge resource materials, and I don't know, north south of male and east west of female when I write. Something as simple as that. I do think those things are incredibly important. It's allowing the gender politics and the thinking of the rest of the world into bridge, because this is not, this is something which is happening everywhere else. And let that in, let that thinking in. Maybe go to another organisation and say, how did you do it? Something like that. Very important.
Thank you. Tracy, you wanted to say something? No?
I had one comment on that from the point of view of the WBF and EBL on the language matter. We have decided already about 2 years ago that every new or updated regulation that we write has to have gender neutral language, and we sometimes we've been struggling, what are we going to use there, or are we going to his/her or her/his, etc., but we now have gender neutral language in every new or updated regulation that we publish. It's a small thing, but I mean it's. Then I have several questions on what the other panelists said, but I can take that at the end.
That's great. Mitch, do you have any thoughts on the gender neutral language? I did think it was interesting that you flagged up the fact that younger players that you were teaching did not seem to display sort of ingrained sexist attitudes. I would be curious, as coming in now as my chair's prerogative and speaking on behalf of Ashley not being here, the fact that obviously those young players are going to be part of the world, and one hopes at one point part of larger bridge clubs, and if there is a culture and a normalization of certain ways of speaking, then that inevitably becomes picked up, right? So they're not living, I guess.
I would just add, further conversation about the point I made before. I just think societies in general are moving forward. I look at I'm 64, and I look at my children who are in their late 20s, and I think they live in a more colorblind world, and I just think societies across the world are progressing, albeit slowly, but they are progressing. And I do think that when Sophie is my age, which is hard for you to fathom, it will be a much more gender neutral world. Yes, I think it's right to correct the language, but retraining people who are 55 or 65 or 75 years old to think differently that's a mountain to climb up. And I do think there's positive steps that should be taken, but the reality is, I think it's really the young people who are a generation younger than most of us. Those are the people who are going to benefit. We change the rules a little bit, and I do think there'll be more opportunities and less of the friction that now exists.
Sophie, you wanted to come in with that? Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, I agree. I've never heard a comment from a young player saying anything to the fact that I am a girl. However, males, often 60, 70 plus, are coming with inappropriate comments, but they never come from the young ones. And I think that's important, and it's good. It seems to be changing.
Just going to put a controversial point out there, since I just came from the gender and aging and generational panel, is that you have an aging cohort here. So if you're trying to bring young people in, but you have older people who are reproducing sexist ideas, is that not going to be proving to be an off-putting environment for your younger players coming in, if there's no will to bring about some kind of change for the older people as well? Just to float that one out there, since so much of the aim of the game is to try and get more young people playing, and that young people's then experiences are with older players that they are problematic. That seems to be a challenge then. Anyway, Sophie, yes.
I'm discussing it a lot with one of my partners. He's 4 years older, and we play a lot in the local community where we're juniors and everyone else is a lot older, and my parents are the second youngest ones. And we discuss a lot and have different, and we need to find ways to change it, but it's really difficult because they come from different cultures or different time age, so we don't really know what to do, but we're trying to come up with solutions, but it's difficult.
But Thank you very much for that, Sophie. That was very helpful and thoughtful response. This has been very lively. Are there any other questions that the panel members would like to posit to each other or ask each other before we move on to a more general Q&A from the attendees?
Yes,
I see Jan's waving a pen. So Jan has a question he'd obviously like to put to the panel. Go for it, Jan.
It's a comment on one comment on what Laura said. I mean, I'm against quotas in general, but that's just a personal general thing. But when it comes to polling, you know, we have started now after every championships at every level. We do a very easy to fill out polls of all participants and captains, etc. Because we want to hear opinions on a lot of things from the participants. But you know, we can't poll the people who are not playing. We really have to.
Yeah, you can actually.
Excuse me, if I may finish. We have to. EBL and WBF cannot do everything for everyone. There are NBOs, there are districts, there are clubs. They are the ones who know which ones are falling away, etc. So some of the jobs, I think, has to be done by them. Can't do everything from the top on an international basis. Comment to Tracy.
Wait, but thank you, Jan. Can Laura respond before we move on to the next one, please?
Yeah, certainly. I think you can do that, actually. But even if you decide that it's too big a task for the EBL or the WBF or the zonal organisations, you can require your member bodies to do it. And in fact, that is what umbrella organisations around the world have done. They have required their participating members to adhere to standards, to carry out specific monitoring tasks. There is no reason at all why the EBL can't say to the European NBOs, we insist that you produce this monitoring information.
Yes.
Because unless you do that, there is little incentive for the NBOs to do it. Most NBOs are run by people who are happy with the status quo. They will not do it of their own accord. But if you are serious about actually obtaining this information and acting on it, it is within your gift to require participating NBOs to produce it for themselves.
Yes, you're right. We can do that, and I have no problem with doing that. It's a good idea.
Thank you.
In a lot of areres, by the way, not only
yes.
this. And we are doing this in a lot of other areas when it comes to disciplinary codes and various other reciprocities, etc., etc.
Sorry, Jan, can I stop you for a second? I apologize, but Mitch just wanted, I think, to come in there. Did you want to come in there, Mitch?
I just wanted to share one other thought before I forgot, because I get spacey. But Tracy did mention a comment about the Hall of Fame, and I did want to offer an observation about that that's actually, I think, relevant to what we're discussing. And that is, I think the misogynism and the problems with sexism are more about the general average or average plus man in the bridge world, and not at the very top. I've been actually the chairman of the American Hall of Fame committee for the past 3.5 years. And I will tell you, on conversations that probably should not be repeated, when we discuss who should be nominated to go into the Hall of Fame, the very top men who are on this panel talk in rather glowing terms about the very top women and deciding who to put on, and all the sexism that we all perceive exists as we eat and breathe. It's not there. I mean, and you know, I think when quotas is a bad word, but when we're talking about excellence, which is what that specific committee is, we're talking about people who achieve so much more than everyone else. And I have not heard a single word out of some of these very top players, both men and women on this committee, about the top women. So there is hope for what we're talking about, but it's mostly the mainstream problems. Okay, I'm done.
Well, that sounds lovely. There, Sam has, and we have part of research that has top women who have challenged that and said that that's not necessarily the case, but okay. I know, Jan, you wanted to say some more, but I really feel that we need to go and move to some questions from participants who have been very, very busy in the chat.
I have very quickly.
Okay, very quickly.
I saved 30 seconds on my previous one. Tracy, at the World Team Championships in Salsa Maggiore in March, the non-qualifiers to the knockouts will play, not a transnational, but they will play an event which is one event for all categories together. They all play against each other, and there will be separate classifications for each category. So to become something that you were looking for. Secondly, Hall of Fame, EBL Hall of Fame has 9 male inductees and 6 female inductees. I know it's not 50-50, but you know, not that far. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jan.
Tracy, do you want to respond to that, or shall we move on?
You can move on.
We're good. Okay, so again, can I just ask our attendees to give a huge thanks to the panel thus far. We are now going to move on to questions from them in the chat for the last literally 10 minutes that we have of this incredibly lively panel. Sorry, while I just pull up a question. Sam, do you want to come in with a question if you have one? I'm sorry, Mike, I appear to be having technical issues.
Sorry, I was slightly too busy writing lots of comments myself. There's been lots of comments. I mean, can any of the panel help by picking out some comments or some questions that they want to refer to while I find some? Sorry.
I don't know if Giorgio Provenzo is online, but he made a really good comment about giving a kind of 2-year or 3-year warning before some of these things were introduced to allow for mentoring development. I thought that was a really nuanced and good response.
Oh, that is a good idea. I think we could pick up on that. I mean, obviously the quota idea, Mary Sharp, has not been greeted with huge enthusiasm across the panel. Some have said it would be good and some not, but there seems to be generally a need for, I think, from listening to the conversations, that organizations from the top down as well as the bottom up put various strategies in place to tackle these issues. Are the panel in agreement with that? Anybody want to comment? Mitch, your hand is still up. I don't know if you're wanting to comment or that's left over. You're done. Okay.
There is one question here, but I think it's probably been covered. But what is stopping women competing in open rather than women's international events? Surely it is their own choice. Perhaps they feel it will be easier to get selected in the women's event as the competition isn't so great.
Any thoughts from the panel? Sophie?
I think it's really interesting with the events where you can choose where you participate, so the open events. Personally, I have played in the girls category several times with good results, and I'm happy with that, but now that I already have good results there, I want to play in the open and show that I can do some good there as well. And I think a lot of players want to play in the girls or women category because it is usually easier competition there, but there are also players who decides to, all girl players or all women players who decides to play in the open categories.
Yeah. I do. I mean, I have a question. I mean, some of the solutions that have been put forward are quite radical. But we can't well, I mean, other than Mary Sharp, who'd say that's what we have to do, we have to just go for it and dive in. Is there another route rather than just abolishing the women's game or doing something super radical? What are smaller steps we need to take to enable this to happen? What needs to happen first? Because I think maybe we're sort of jumping and diving to an outcome or a sort of an endpoint, and we've got lots and lots of small steps that need to be taken before we can actually achieve that. That's my personal view, but I'd like to hear from others. What are these smaller things that we can do to address these issues?
I mean, I think, you know, we need to show women playing bridge at the higher levels. We need to be celebrating that more, and it needs to be a little bit more, you know, the commentators on the view graphs. just in general, I think we can just do a better job. I think one of the other areas of getting involved here in the ACBL, almost everybody making decisions are at the retirement age and above. And we've talked about this, and Mitch talked about it with his own children, and I see it. I have a non-binary daughter, and you know, that her generation and a lot of her friend group don't really like to see gender. They want to be more feminine. They want to be more feminine that day. They want to be more masculine that day. They want to be more masculine. And that generation coming up, but if we wait for them to get into that administration role, so I think our current administrations need to be bringing in the younger generations and asking them opinions and schedules and other things. I would love to see a women's event not start on the same day as the open events, right? So we should have the open event, and then maybe in trying to get the women to compete in that open event and getting into the final stages. And, you know, I really like the idea of us all competing together with maybe some special recognition, because that's one of the things. The more that we are all competing as one group, is we're all minds. And I think as we keep moving forward, my generation and younger, I have an equal partner. My husband, you know, jokingly will say he's my wife, because we're equals. He helps me with my family, which allows me to then go and concentrate on other things and other passions. And I know the older generation didn't always have that luxury, and the younger generation will be having more equal partnerships. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of value coming up, but we need to start being extremely mindful of everything that we're doing now. And it's nice to see somebody in a leadership role like John, who thinks, you know, that seems to be thinking and trying to make some progress. So thank you.
So I think that's great when you talk about solutions. So your solution is, you know, that we need to think about the timing of the events as would be one thing. We've had a mention of gender neutral language. Are there other smaller things that people think need to happen? Any suggestions? Yes, Jan?
There was a very interesting comment which I responded to in the chat from Giorgio P something. He suggested that why not try in the youth categories to give fair warning to NBOs that in 5 years time the U26 category women will disappear, but the U26 Open must include at least 2 women/girls, whatever. Not making it immediately gives the federation a chance to prepare in their youth programs, etc., for this policy. And I thought it was quite an interesting idea, at least. I don't know what Mary and Laura especially.
Sophie has her would like to speak.
Yeah, no, I was referring to that. I think Giorgio's idea is great. He's the head of EBED, by the way, the CEO of EBED.
Sophie, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I think if we do that, we shouldn't stop with just doing that for the under 26. We should also do it for under 21 and under 16, because the problem now might be that someone starts to practice and they have girls for the under 26 teams, but they don't have it for the under 21 and under 16, which will create problems in a couple of years. So if we end up doing that, we need to do it in all 3 categories, I think.
Yeah. Might be difficult though, because some small federations have so few players, they can hardly get one team together. But yeah. Anyway, it's worth thinking about this one.
Yeah, no, I think so. That's one thing thinking about. Is there any other ones that I'm aware that, you know, as I'm a bit like Mary. I'm a bit like you burn the house down and see what happens. But I know that as I'm not the bridge player, that's very easy for me to say.
And I'm not a top woman who's selected for these teams myself either, so it's easy for me to say.
I guess it's because I'm very reminded of you know, Audre Lorde's work, where she's always said that, you know, the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. So, you know, that maybe there needs to be other ways and other tools being used and developed by groups of women to bring about the change that will not be reliant on organizations that are necessarily sclerotic and slow to change. But Sam, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. There's one here about someone wanting to hear more about equity versus equality. And that was the subject of what Ashley was going to talk about. And perhaps, I don't know, Laura, whether you can say a bit more about that. I think there's some confusion as to the difference between equity and equality. I think a lot of the comments reflect that kind of confusion.
Sorry, I was just switching my microphone on. Yes, I mean, I think, you know, this is back to what I was saying about level playing fields, equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. And there's a famous cartoon where various animals are told that the winner will be whoever climbs to the top of the tree first. And obviously the elephant is going to have a lot more difficulty doing that than the monkey. So equality of opportunity says, well, we won't place any barriers in your way and the opportunity is there for you to take, but fails to take account of the other societal and structural factors which prevent a particular category of people from being able to win or to improve, or, you know, whatever the desired outcome is. And some of those factors, the societal factors, the Bridge world is not going to get rid of on its own. It's not going to be able to get rid of women's primary responsibility for childcare without major changes in society, which is one reason why the Nordic countries are doing better, actually. But there are aspects of it which the Bridge world can deal with and can take a lead on. And those are the kinds of things that I was talking about when I said we need to look at these things from a, you know, we need to get professionals in to look at what those factors are. And one of them is a sort of Buggins turn mentality. One of them is assuming that the best person for the job is going to be somebody who's a top class bridge player, when, you know, that will kind of automatically and perhaps unintentionally include most women because the women haven't made it to the top. I mean, those are just examples, but the difference in essence between the equality and equity approaches is one of them looks at one of them looks at just making sure that there's no discrimination, and the other one looks at how you achieve a desirable outcome.
Thank you, that's perfect. We are coming near to the end of the session, so I guess unless Sam, your hand is up again, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I've just gone through the sort of filtered thread, and there's lots of, you know, really interesting themes coming up, and we will do a detailed report on this. But I suppose one final question that I'd quite like to know is, we do have now 2 projects with lots of evidence and lots of findings, and we're willing as a team to turn those into some kind of useful, accessible resources that could be of benefit, rather than just writing academic papers about this. What would the panel think would be useful for us to do with the material we've got to help raise awareness of gender issues in the Bridge world and to help drive forward some kind of change?
I wonder if the focus, academic is a great place to start, but I think journalism is your tool. So I think we need to kind of get into the press. I was just thinking about the 1980s Guardian Women's page, where they had a column called Naked Ape, you know, where you would have awful things were said about women. Sorry, this is a very British English reference, but something like that, you know, to get into the journalism, to get the message out to the vast majority, and so we're kind of translating the academic work down.
But I think the danger of that would be, I think there would be a fear within the Bridge community that that would be bad publicity. And I know there's no such thing as bad publicity, but equally, I don't think we want to necessarily inflict damage externally when we could actually do more things to address it internally before we go external.
Let's turn that round. It's good publicity because we're doing something about it. We're taking positive action. Church of England decides to appoint women vicars. That's good publicity for the Church of England. Turn it round.
And is there no place for some kind of toolkit for gender awareness training or unconscious bias training for? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, to me, the bias awareness training is absolutely key. And many of the comments that I have seen in the chat, but also from panelists, participants, you know, it's not their fault, but there are things that perhaps people aren't aware of. There are these structural factors, societal factors that people perhaps haven't taken into account when they're making their decisions. And that particularly applies to selectors, actually, in countries where selection is not by automatic, by trial, that people can't overcome their innate prejudices if they don't know what those innate prejudices are. And we're all subject to them, you know, we've all got them. It's just that some of us have been trained to spot them when they rear their heads. So I do think that would be very useful to have that kind of toolkit and to encourage NBOs to apply that kind of awareness training.
Thank you. Sam has just pulled a poll up for you to fill in. It's, again, I think it's revisiting what the question was that we asked at the beginning of the panel, which is, have you changed your mind? Given what you have heard today, are you for or against the women's game? And it would be just great for those of you who are here to fill it out to see whether or not there's been any movement or change based on the discussions that we have had here.
I can't see the whole question, I'm afraid. The chat bar's not wide enough.
Same for me.
Yeah, it might be, it depends, it varies depending on your browser and how you have come into Teams, unfortunately.
Okay. So if you hover over it, you can see the whole question. Actually, if you just hover the cursor over it.
Yes, the options are that you vote for and that you've not changed your mind. You vote for that we should keep it, but you have changed your mind. You vote against that we should abolish it and you've not changed your mind. You vote against we should abolish it, but you have changed your mind. Not sure and you've not changed your mind. Not sure and you have changed your mind because you were sure before. Sorry, that's a bit complex, but hopefully you get it.
So, how many we've got getting a number of responses coming in, so that's good. I think the not sures are still winning, Sam. Even after such a lively debate, it's still like, I'm still not sure.
I think what it does show, in the same way of the discussion last night about cheating, these are complex social problems that require complex solutions. And I don't think it's something that we can solve immediately, but we do have to raise awareness that both cheating and gender are organisational, institutional, structural issues, as well as individual personal ones. That's my personal tuppence worth to end.
No, and I think that's a good place for us to end. Can I invite everyone to give the panel a huge round of applause and thank you for giving up their time and energy and effort to come and join this panel and to share their opinions and views and their expertise. I would now, we're now going to bring this session to a final close. So huge thanks, and thank you so much. It's been very engaging and wonderful, and a really lively discussion, which is what we hope this would all be about. And we hope that people, if they want to carry on conversations, can carry on the conversations afterwards or in the chat, or contact us via BAMSA. Please do let us know what you think. As you can see, the rest of the session, the tournament, we carry on. we are not yet finished. There is a pairs taster session for those people out there who aren't actual bridge, you know, aficionados and would like to give a taster of it. That happens this evening, as you can see. And tomorrow is our final day of the conference, where we are going to be talking about learning, education and development in bridge, talking about how we market bridge as well. So clearly maybe marketing it as a sexist game is the way to go, but joke, sorry. Other than that, I will again want to thank everyone for their contributions. And if you are interested in supporting BAMSA in any way, there's some information on this final slide for you to do that. And otherwise, please do give us your feedback and your opinions. We're always very keen to hear that. But thank you very much on behalf of the BAMSA team for attending the session, and we wish you a rest of a very good day. Thank you.